Got it. That. Oh, good. Oh.
All right. It's a race against time.
I went to open Zoom and it told me like the app needed to be updated. I'm like, what? 100 times now it's telling me to update the thing.
Conveniently.
Yeah, conveniently.
All right, so we'll let people in very, very shortly.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Doc.
You guys see me? I can't see myself.
Shall we refer to you as Doc in these official meetings, or?
Oh, we have to.
You guys hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Yeah. I just can't see myself. I'm logically in that. Let me change the view.
All right. I'm just going to open up the room maybe in 1 minute, right, guys? Just a heads up. I'll give you a heads up.
My computer is that old that it doesn't allow background pictures, but I'll try.
I'm assuming that you'll just skip the slides as we're talking, or how are we going to?
Yep.
Yeah,
You've got the PowerPoint in front of you, but right?
Yeah, I can see it, but you will just control it.
Yeah, easy. All right. I think I'll pin you guys just so everybody pin. Okay, so 3, 2, 1.
Bismillah.
Okay. Just make sure that no one's left in the waiting room. Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and welcome to today's session. Just give a few seconds. I think everyone's in. Perfect. Hey, sister. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome.
Thank you. How is everybody?
Alhamdulillah, I think we're trying to be as best as we can with everything going on. Alhamdulillah, always. Alrighty, I think we're ready to roll, guys. Inshallah. All right, so we're going to get started. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. Thank you for joining us. I'm grateful, firstly and foremost, that we've taken the time out of our busy schedules to come together in this virtual space for an important topic, and it is a crucial time in terms of the climate that we're currently in. And I believe we have educators all across Australia zooming in today, both from private and public schools. So my name is Ziad, and I'll be hosting and co-presenting today with my colleagues. So just a little bit about myself. I'm an educator by background, a high school teacher, and I currently work in the mental health and suicide prevention space as the director at Educate Australia. And I'll pass on to Ayman just for a brief introduction.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Ayman Islam. I'm the Executive Officer for the Centre for Muslim Wellbeing. So we're an organisation that focuses on prevention activities and stigma reduction, particularly in Muslim communities. It's lovely to be here with you all today for this really informative session.
Thanks, Ayman. And over to you, Dr. Ali.
Welcome, everyone. My name's Ali. Doctor by trade, training psychiatrist in the making. I just work in the public sector, mainly in and around Sydney. So it'd be good to see what the other side looks like.
Awesome, inshallah. Thank you so much, guys. So just a little bit of kind of setting the scene. I know there's an introduction isn't necessarily needed, but what brings us today is the unfolding of global events overseas. And I guess for the last 35 days or so, we've been watching from afar the genocide and the ethnic cleansing happening in Gaza, in Palestine. And I think whilst there seems to be many things happening that are out of our control, I guess we just pause for a moment and take the time to renew our intention that by being here today, we're trying as best as we can with whatever's within our control to try and support both ourselves and our school communities, the young people, our fellow staff members, as well as our families. So I guess, yeah, I just wanted to kind of start off by that. I'd also wanted to start off by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which I'm zooming in from today. I would like to acknowledge the Darug people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to invite you all to, I guess, jot down in the box.
I'll message you outside.
Okay, I think somebody's unmuted, but yeah, that's okay. If we can jot down the lands we're zooming in from today, that would be great in the chat box. And I also wanted to, I guess, acknowledge Indigenous peoples all around the world. Today, in particular, we know the struggle of the Palestinian people in occupied Palestine who've also had their land stolen. And this photo and quote is quite personal to me. As an Australian born Palestinian, I recognize and acknowledge the shared struggle with Indigenous peoples of Australia who've emerged resilient despite years of oppression. And inshallah, today's event is an opportunity to come together and connect and share and hopefully learn from one another. In extension to the acknowledgement, I wanted to also point out that we come together as communities in the context of coping through collective struggle and community trauma. And we seek, I wanted to point out personally, and I think all of us here are seeking inspiration from Indigenous perspectives of ways of being in community by referring to the social and emotional well-being wheel that we see on the screen on the left-hand side. And we know that as Muslims or educators working with young Muslims, the concept of self is grounded in a collectivist perspective in a similar way to the Indigenous ways of well-being. And we cannot separate that from our community, our families, and our faith and spirituality. And in a similar way, on the right-hand side, we also acknowledge that our way of well-being as Muslims or as people working with Muslims is rooted in the Islamic model of the soul, which is an awesome depiction here on the right-hand side of that was posed by Dr. Abdullah Rothman. And I guess the parallels in these two models, I think, is something we need to definitely be leaning on in these times of difficulty and hardship. Sorry, I think there's somebody that's unmuted. Okay. Yeah, cool. Alrighty. So just moving on, just a little bit about the Shifa project. You might have seen this perhaps floating around on your social media platforms. You see in our Zoom backgrounds. It's a project that was actually launched almost 35 days ago at the beginning of these recent string of events. And we know Shifa is the Arabic word for healing. However, we've used it here to name the project, and we're naming it after the Shifa Hospital, which is in Gaza, one of the largest hospitals in Gaza. And we know that's symbolized a place, and we know for people on the front line in Gaza, it's been a place for refuge for many. It's also been a place for healing the wounded. And unfortunately, as of recently, it's also been a place of mourning and a site for burial and putting people down to rest. So I guess we wanted this project to be a representation of that for those of us that are feeling wounded, that are struggling, that are feeling numb, to come together and to connect and to heal and cope through this as a community. And this project was launched as a partnership between organizations, individuals, mental health professionals, to provide an initiative that provides both psychological and spiritual support for our communities across Australia, and to look after ourselves. We can't advocate and call for justice if we ourselves internally aren't well. So it's a fine balance where our advocacy goes hand in hand with our well-being and our spirituality and our faith also. So these are just some of the organizations that we've been kind of loosely collaborating on the Shifa project. So Educate, Mindwise, 6 Degrees, the Muslim Mental Health Professionals, and the Center for Muslim Wellbeing. I also like to take this opportunity to remind you that as we go through today's segment, to look after ourselves. I think, like I said, we don't need an introduction to the current climate. Many of us are hurting, and we're all coping in different ways. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And yeah, just a kind reminder that if you feel like you do need to take a break or you do need to seek that extra support, then we have listed some services and initiatives that are listed on the screen that you can access in this current climate. And lean on your own support, your EAP that you might have access to through your own schools and employment places as well, inshallah. All right, I guess what will be discussed today is confidential. So if we are sharing stories, just a kind reminder to perhaps de-identify who you may be talking about. And hopefully this is, with this reminder, it allows us to build a safe space for us all, inshallah. A bit of an outline. So Ali, Ayman, and I will be co-presenting. The premise of today has actually been, we kind of put it out there that we're launching a toolkit that we've put together. We've brought our resources together to hopefully build capacity in schools around facilitating support circles and how to do that. So very, very broadly today, we'll be kind of just grounding ourselves in the current climate, talking about community trauma and the implications on school communities, staff, students, and families, and how can we respond to the psychosocial, spiritual needs of our constituents in our schools. And then we'll be wrapping up with a launch of the toolkit itself, what it's about, how to use it, when you're going to be able to access it, and inshallah, an opportunity for you also to kind of connect with one another. So side by side with the toolkit, we're also going to be talking about a network that we're setting up at the moment, just to stay connected and supportive of one another as facilitators of support for others. We've alluded to the current climate. I guess the crux of today, been speaking to a lot of people, young and old, even through my own personal experiences. Like I said, we're hurting, we're being impacted in so many different ways. And whilst we can never imagine what it's actually like to be in Gaza at the moment, and the trauma they're facing. We're also this is a test for us, not taking away from their test. We're also being tested in the way we react. The fact that we're also living vicariously through what we're seeing on our screens, and the sounds of the crying mothers, and etc., and the list goes on. And like I said, people are reacting in different ways. We're being impacted in different ways. People are reporting that people are difficulty sleeping and expressions of their emotions in different ways, crying. There's somatic repercussions. People are talking about how they're aching in their bodies. They can't taste food properly because of what they're seeing and have been witnessing. So this is, like I said, the quote on the screen, we don't heal in isolation, but in community. So this is a time, as we know, we are undergoing trauma as a community. We're witnessing trauma unfold. And this is a time for connection and community. And hopefully that's what, I guess when we're talking about facilitating support circles, this is exactly what we want to be promoting today, inshallah. All right, so this is the toolkit. You would have seen a snapshot on our flyer. So this toolkit it serves as a practical tool and resource for school leaders, for counselors and wellbeing teachers with a background in mental health first aid or any other gatekeeper training. So this guide is evidence informed. So we're bringing together research and best practice to kind of facilitate something that's easy and accessible for people on the front line and people working in schools. To be able to facilitate, as mentioned there, to facilitate these groups in schools. And just a bit of a heads up, as we go through today, we're going to be using the words interchangeably: support circles, facilitating healing circles, facilitating critical incident stress debriefing circles. So all those words will be used interchangeably, or alluding to the fact that this toolkit is about how to conduct this in the most safe way possible and providing a space for expression and coping. So I might give you the mic, schools and people joining us today, inshallah, and just posing this question before I hand over to Dr. Ali. You feel free to unmute or jot it down in the text box. How are we navigating supporting our students, staff, and families in our current climate? I guess what are the challenges and what are the opportunities? I have an opportunity to have a bit of a yarn here, briefly. Anyone like to go?
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Ziad.
Wa alaikum salam, Sister Talta. How are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. I just thought I would jump in really quickly and just suggest that, like, from my professional perspective as a psychologist, it's been really difficult. I've had quite a few universities and families and communities reach out to me to do structured debriefs, and I feel like a school space has actually been missing. Like, there's lots of ad hoc responses, schools not wanting to have an official position for all sorts of reasons. But I think there's a really great opportunity for us to reframe the discussion in a way that works to our narrative. And so really supporting our students' resilience and mental health, like there's a big movement to that. And if it means that's what we need to do to get our students supportive, I think, this toolkit is a really good way of doing it. I guess I'm curious to see what the toolkit is and, any responsibilities associated with it. So I think just really an opportunity to change the narrative or own the narrative and redirect the narrative, I think is really powerful, giving sense and purpose to what's happening for our students. And that's it from me. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. No, thank you so much. Very, very valuable insights. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for the work you're doing in supporting community also. Brilliant.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Ziad. Can you hear me?
Alaikum salam. Yes, I can hear you. Yep.
Okay. You just have to excuse my toddler in the background.
That's okay.
But I'm from Irfan College, and what we've been doing is just raising a lot of awareness, doing a lot of lessons on the significance of Beit al-Maqdas. We've had assemblies dedicated to the current situation, where we've invited Sheikh Tariq al-Bakai on call to action and what we can do here, because our students and educators tend to feel quite helpless, but then we look at the significance of dua. So we've done the absent janaza. We recite the dua for the oppressed, dua for victory, a few things like that based on our tradition, and try to do something each day. We've also notified our students and our families that they can get in touch with our school counsellor.
Brilliant.
Yeah, they're the few things I can think of from the top of my mind at the moment.
MashaAllah. That's amazing. Thank you. Samah, right?
Yes.
MashaAllah. Awesome to have you here and sharing your insights. Jazakallah. Thank you.
And we've done, sorry, thank you. We've done the same at AIA, Melbourne Secondary Campus, which is a 6 to 12 campus. And we had a week of structured activities, and we've allowed students to fundraise, do things like journaling,
Wow.
wear particular outfits to express their support and identity. And we've also been promoting the counselling services a lot more for staff, parents and students.
Phenomenal. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing.
Hi, can I just add, so I'm at Ilim College primary, and I do private work, and I'm really focused on the younger group, younger age group. So it's just having discussions around informing parents how to talk to their children is different for the younger children than it would be for the children who are the teenagers. So we've put out some information for parents, and the second information document I'm putting together is about social media, which I think is really important to get the message out that young kids should not be seeing those images, some of those images that we are seeing as adults. And I've got lots of reasons behind that. So we're trying to get to really informing parents. But while I was having a discussion with the principal, I think it's also, again, really important that we give the message that that it's okay to grieve, and it's okay for us to feel like this. And how we're feeling is quite normal, because because it's something that's really, that's happening to all of us. So rather than feeling like we have to suppress it, I feel like schools are trying to navigate how to sort of, how to work through this, because of the politics behind things as well, and the funding and things like that. So I feel like it's important that the kids and the communities knows that they have a voice, that they can grieve, that they have that they feel comfortable in doing that, whether it's in a school or in our communities.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Invaluable. Thank you so much for sharing your advice and your tips. And I think, there's so many themes and things that you've all touched on. But I think the one that really shines through is the importance of promoting healthy coping and expressions of emotions. And the second thing is really the anchoring in our faith, and really taking charge of that narrative, as Sister Toltu was talking about, that we center our narrative around us, but also kind of promote and amplify our anchors, which is our faith in these difficult times. I might give a small little plug here that we've actually started a bit of a WhatsApp group. So we're going to present this a little bit later, but we've actually started a little bit of a WhatsApp community amongst educators and counselors, just to bring them together to do a bit of cross-sharing, like some of the information you've already shared in that group. But we'll be sharing the links in the chat as well as the fact that beyond today, we're going to hopefully set up a network for people that take the toolkit, so that they can stay connected and call for support if they need it, or request on-site facilitation. That will come a little bit later. But I might take this opportunity to pass over to Dr. Ali, who'll take us through the next few slides. Thank you again for your contributions, inshallah. And yeah, over to you, Ali.
Thank you, Ziad. I think my aim here is to provide a bit of a clinical aspect to all this. I guess it's quite important, and it's probably, given our professional backgrounds of a lot of us and what we're dealing with, it's quite relevant. I hear the words resilience and adversity, which is quite good. And that's something I sort of leaned on during my training. But recently, my psychotherapy supervisor introduced me to a new way of thinking about things. And rather than being reactive in our responses, being more reflexive. And I think that's something we need to develop, something automatic and apt and sort of modifiable to what we're dealing with. And the range of different responses that you've all been giving sort of proves the uniqueness of everyone's different situation and within their own environments or whatever political landscape they're dealing with. But nevertheless, the end result is the same, right? And we're wanting to harbor these very safe spaces. We're wanting to ensure that our constituents, whether they're fellow staff members, community members, or students, feel supported and feel like they can get help. Obviously, I'm not going to sort of blanket assume that everyone here is a clinician, but maybe your role as a wellbeing teacher or an educator is to provide that first safe sort of touching point. And I think it's important that we recognize those initial signs as well and sort of provide context as to why we're doing this. So obviously the word trauma has been thrown around quite a lot. And I know one of the sisters previously mentioned like exposure to explicit images and sort of discussions which aren't age appropriate probably. And those are all quite important, okay? The one thing that I might highlight as well here is, I know we're talking about critical incident stress debriefing, and Ayman might go over it later in terms of time frame, but I think the uniqueness of ongoing crises and war is that trauma is perpetual in terms of what we're exposed to. So there's something, and the news cycle is very short, obviously, for a lot of us. So there's something we're exposed to every 24 hours, right? Which is something new and something different and probably traumatizing in a different way. And that's something we need to be aware of as well, that until, unfortunately, this ceases, exposure to the community is going to be perpetual and is going to be changing on a daily basis. So we can't just assume because it started about 5 weeks ago that it's not going to affect anyone or any one of our students any more tomorrow than it did the week before. Okay. But regardless, I think just talking about a few signs of how trauma and traumatic events affect people's behaviors. So obviously hyperarousal is one thing that we're all used to, right? And hyperarousal can be beneficial. I know in my time as an emergency sort of doctor, hyperarousal is quite sort of efficient in your workspace and sort of gets you done, gets you on a good pace. But unfortunately, what that probably does as well is that it probably leads to heightened anxiety and poor stress tolerance and distress tolerance and coping as well. And so I know as adults, it sort of tends to manifest as becoming very nitpicky and micromanagey and not really understanding how we can continue to work or sort of continue our daily lives without dealing on the acute stresses of every little thing. Okay. And to do that, I think that we need to be cognizant of two things. So obviously the effect of the trauma on ourselves, and the effect of the traumatic events of obviously the students and the staff around us. Okay. The one thing we also need to be cognizant of as well is the impact of trauma on the wider community. So not only affecting ourselves and fellow staff members and students, but their communities, their families, their circles around them. Okay. And obviously there's a graphic on the slides. I'm not going to read through it, but I'm sure we can all understand what these symptoms can manifest as and can look like. The one thing we obviously don't want to forget, and I'm sure this will probably happen on a couple of slides later, is the long-term effects of trauma and what that does to our dysregulation and our ability to cope and regulate ourselves in future. Okay, whether it manifests into something like complex PTSD in future is obviously, we're unable to predict that, but obviously the more exposed someone is to that trauma, perpetually and repeatedly, the higher the risk. And that's what we want to avoid, obviously. We can go to the next slide, please, Z. And so obviously this trauma is happening within the community, right? So the primary role is to cope and return to pre-critical incident functioning as quickly as possible. Quite difficult, obviously, unfortunately, at this stage, especially when there's no foreseeable end in future. And that's where you guys come in. We're going to make sure that you guys are more reflexive and able to actually deal with situations. And that doesn't mean curing people or managing people acutely, whatever their range of mental health concerns, but being able to facilitate those sort of safe conversations, being able to identify early, okay, this is going on. I need to pull this one aside and I need to talk to them, or I need to alert wellbeing staff that this young person needs a bit more extra attention, whilst you also use your own knowledge, experience, and experience with psychological first aid. All right. And like we said, we want to prevent those long-term consequences. All right. We don't want this to eventuate into a lifelong detriment to their own mental health and their own coping mechanisms. All right. And of course, we've all mentioned earlier in the discussion that Ziad sort of brought to the floor was that a lot of the people that we are helping are the children and adolescents around us. But again, I've got to reiterate that there are still families of those clients and those kids and those young people, as well as staff members around you and yourselves. All right. And if I could just narrate, obviously, a couple of ahadith. The first one by Bukhari: a believer to another believer is like a building whose different parts support each other. And the Prophet then clasped his hands with his fingers interlaced, as you can probably see on the graphic there. Another similar one is the believers in their mutual kindness, compassion, and sympathy are just like one body. When one of the limbs suffer, the whole body responds to it in wakefulness and fever. And I think that just reiterates our communal responsibility as well. And I'm sure that's what drives a lot of everyone's attendance here today. Okay, and that's something we can't lose sight of as well. And so this is probably something everyone's familiar with in some sense, and I'll explain how. Okay, so obviously this is a similar model we use in trauma-informed practice in schools. And basically it leans on a lot of the models similar to disaster relief and sort of a response, okay? And so obviously the ideal world is that we're always prepared for these critical events. There's immediate action, short-term processes and follow-up thereafter, and then long-term practices that we instill, which get us better prepared for the next time. But I believe if we click the slide again, yeah, all right, and this is where the emergency usually happens, okay? And I'm sure we're all quite aware as educators and whether you're in leadership at schools, that you already play quite an important role in the disaster planning of your school. This is where this toolkit probably fits in, okay? In terms of immediate follow-up and then short-term, so after this arrow, okay? And I'm sure there's, whether it's subconscious or not, a lot of you are probably apt enough with this sort of response when it comes to, unfortunately, the state of our community and the disasters globally that we've experienced and have affected our community, whether it's the war on terror 20 years ago, for those of you with vast years of experience, to more recently earthquakes in Turkey, in Afghanistan, the plight of the Uyghurs, etc. Okay. And like I said previously, the one thing we do need to lean on, and something I encourage everyone, of course, if we haven't already, is probably familiarize yourself and train yourselves up in psychological first aid. So obviously there are some core principles, and I'm sure if we did take a minute to think about them without having this in front of us, these would pop to mind. So the first thing, like I reiterated, first and foremost, is ensuring the safety of that child or that young person or that staff member. So if, for example, we can see someone being affected by explicit images or being quite affected by conversations which involve discussion of death and warfare, probably ensuring the safety of that individual and removing them, okay? The second one is keeping calm and providing that safe space, okay? So ensuring, I don't know, it's like first response as well, like doctors A, B, C, D, I like to always think about first aid, you know? Ensuring that the danger has been removed and now there's a safe sort of calm presence where you're able to take hold and ensure that, you know, they're not going to be at risk of being exposed in the near future to any of that. And there's a way forward where we start to connect with others. We encourage that self-efficacy, you know. We help the family members or the young person themselves identify their own strengths and in being able to cope. And also lead them in the direction to sort of upskill themselves in that. And the fifth and final one is obviously having hope, all right? So the one thing we have to normalize ourselves with is that, as you've all alluded to, people's response and young people's responses to unfortunate events like what is going on at the moment are quite normal, okay? It's our facilitation in ensuring the safety of those spaces and being able to debrief them on a regular basis. It's what is going to be able to help sort of align that normality and use it in terms of empowering their resilience, okay? And in school, that might look a bit different, you know, like that might mean limiting the workload of staff members or that specific student, all right? Being watchful, whether it's through a teacher's aid or through the watchful eye of yourself throughout the day, to have an eye, particularly on that student of concern. But like you all mentioned previously as well, the one thing that makes it all unique is everyone's work environment and school environment is also unique, all right? So obviously I would recommend ensuring that there is a hierarchy of sort of command in terms of how you report this and who you enlist to help you. But it might be a good idea to maybe get some more discussion from you guys as to how this model of sort of disaster response and psychological first aid works within your own settings and your own school settings. And I think that would segue well into Ayman actually discussing critical incident stress debriefing.
So you're asking for some responses, Ali, with regards to how...
If anyone sort of has a good example of how disaster response works within their own setting, whether it's a school or community org, or if there's any sort of concerns with how this would actually work. Is it actually working in your schools? Do we find that there are roadblocks, or do we just find that we're not skilled enough to actually ensure that this is a smooth flowing process?
I believe from my experience, the schools have great intentions to assist. However, I don't believe we're skilled enough to assist.
Do you mind me asking, Sister, sorry, do we think it's because of experience that you guys aren't skilled enough, or maybe you're not offered the right training to be able to respond?
I think it's both.
No, it's insightful, I think. And I think that's part of what we're doing here with Shifa Project as well, is trying to sort of understand whether vacuums in the school and community sector exist, so we can try and fill them. But yeah, I think this might be a good time to segue through to Ayman, actually discussing briefly what critical incident stress debriefing is about and giving a bit of an overview of what's entailed through the toolkit. Off to you, Ayman.
All right. Jazakallah khair, Brother Ali. Some of you might be familiar with critical incident stress debriefing. It also has the other name, which is critical incident stress management. So you might have heard both of those terms, but they're pretty interchangeable. But as Brother Ziad was mentioning at the start, critical incident stress debriefing is an evidence-based practice that allows participants to process and reflect on traumatic events they might have experienced or vicariously experienced, in this case, and gain some personal control over the incident. So it was developed to provide really a safe and open and non-judgmental space for people impacted by trauma. And it's really about enabling each participant to really fully experience that initial reaction when they've experienced a critical incident or they've experienced trauma. It's provided as a form of group session, so it's not an individual support-based modality. It works as a group session, and what we would recommend is that the group range, depending on the space, should be about 15 to 25 in one group, and it can be run for children, adults, elderly, and many other groups as well. So what we really like about this particular model is the fact that it is actually quite flexible and quite portable. So you can actually take it and adapt it to the setting that you're in. So really, during group sessions, the facilitator running these SISD sessions help participants understand their emotional reactions. They help validate their responses. And then the critical part is providing stress management tools and resources for continued support. So although it's similar to a therapy session, it's not. It's really not intended to replace individual or group therapy or anything like that. It's more there as a complementary support. Next one. Okay, so great, thanks, Ziad. So as I said, it's definitely engineered in the sense for a group setting. So around 15 to 25. If you're engaging with children, usually sessions will be around about 60 minutes, and if it's adults, you're looking at 2 to 2.5 hours. And that's because the process is quite slow and it's supportive. Really, when you're conducting SISD sessions, you're really allowing thoughts and emotions to come up, and you're trying to support ways for people to process those emotions and then move towards hope and positive action. And the group's already mentioned a lot of different positive action which is happening across the schools. I noticed, by allowing people to rest, or by journaling and going to protests and things like that. So we already starting to see a little bit of that positive action taking place. But really, it's really there as a supportive place for facilitators to allow groups to discuss their emotions and to grieve. And so that was also earlier mentioned. So it's just allowing people to process and then to land in a really positive space. Do you want to jump to the next one, Sad? So the toolkit. So what is it? So you can see on the screen there's a little image there, and we'll send this toolkit to everyone that's registered, and we'll also have links to access it on our our social media pages and everyone that's on our mailing list and WhatsApp groups as well. But within the toolkit, the first page, you won't be able to see it here, will be basically a video training. So one of the psychologists from Melbourne, Sister Monique Tui from Nasiha Consulting, has graciously given up her time in putting together a training resource that you can access. So it's about a 25-minute video, and it goes through the entire model of SISD. So there's about 7 phases in all in the model itself, which goes through introduction and place setting and going through facts to talking about emotions, and then finally going into that phase of healing. So there's a video that goes through all of those kind of things, as well as some background information on the model. And then complementary to that is a couple of resources that you'll find there as well. So things like feeling word vocabulary lists, sensation word vocab lists as well, to help facilitators kind of run those sessions and those groups. In terms of joining the WhatsApp groups, I think Ziad will share that across. But there's a couple of ways we're asking for people to get involved. So you can look to access the training yourself and then deliver the training to your specific group as well. So there you go. You've got the guided toolkit to upskill and implement in your own school community. That's one option there. And there's an on-site request option. So you can request from the Shifa project an on-site facilitator for your school from amongst our network, and we can try to arrange someone to come out and speak to your group and do a SISD session with them. The other thing that we're hoping to do and hoping to build is really a network. So we really want educators, counsellors, and others to join the Shifa project. One, really to support each other, particularly if you're collectively, if you're delivering these SISD, these circles, so you can learn from one another and provide valuable advice. But also, as Brother Ali and Brother Ziad have alluded to, we're trying to find some of the gaps in schools and trying to look at what other interventions we might be able to support and develop to support students and teachers and community as we live through this ongoing crisis. So 3 options there for you. So you can take on the toolkit yourself and try to upskill yourself and implement in your own school community. If you don't feel confident in that, you can request a facilitator for your school, and we're happy to organize that.
Yep. And we know that schools are really busy places. So if you don't have the capacity at present, or your staff don't have the emotional energy to be able to facilitate these, this is where we're giving the schools an option to request an on-site facilitator amongst the network. So if any of you want to also join that network and make yourself available, if we have professionals amongst us, then we are putting a bit of a call out also for you to join and offer your services during these difficult times, so that if there's schools, but also community spaces that want a facilitator, we can also kind of arrange that too, inshallah. Sorry, Ayman, for jumping in.
No, that's good, brother. Yeah, like I said, this is about the school settings, but yeah, like the model itself is quite practical and quite flexible. That we believe it works in community settings as well. So in addition to just talking, in addition to the video training and the support resources, also in the toolkit, you'll find some psycho-spiritual support as well. So you'll find some advice in there and some other resources that you can lean on, depending on the group and the setting that you're addressing. And you'll also find, additional numbers of support. So people that you can contact if you need further support, or if you're being impacted as well, places that you can reach out for help. I will say that the toolkit doesn't sit by itself as well. So after the session ends, you open up the toolkit, don't feel like you're alone. That's part of the reason why we've created the WhatsApp group, so you can have a space to connect with others that are trying to deliver and support in these sessions. But also we're offering communal reflective practices in the future. So depending on the number of facilitators that we have, once people have run their sessions, we want to bring them together with some other experienced facilitators to debrief as well, see what's going well, what isn't, what needs to be changed. We know that the toolkit itself isn't perfect. It's a living and breathing document. We want to continue to improve upon it and make sure that it's fit for purpose for our community as we move forward. So we really lean on your collective wisdom and your expertise as we run through this process, inshallah.
Beautiful.
I think
We
there's a
might
quick-
just, Ayman, maybe we'll pause for a moment and just invite some questions, comments, queries before we look at wrapping up. Is that okay?
yeah,
Does anyone have any questions, comments, queries, concerns, qualms?
Just a comment.
Yep.
So I was reaching out to CMW, and I think Brother Eamon to really get something going in the schools, and this is really great. Sometimes what happens is schools like other people coming and presenting, and that's why I kind of was looking if there's anyone else that can come and wants to present at the school, and I really like that. Like, I don't mind presenting at another school or community, but schools like the idea of hearing from somebody else. So that's why I think that's a really good idea, where if we can have people maybe put their hand up, and it could be Zoom as well. It doesn't all have to be face-to-face, basically on Zoom, where we can sort of have different people presenting at different schools.
Brilliant. That's amazing. Yep, totally agree. And yeah, schools have actually expressed that recently to me as well, that they prefer an external voice to speak to staff and students. I don't, it's a little bit, so these QR codes are actually, they're not just for show, they actually work. So feel free to scan them. However, I think so if you are a clinician or somebody with a mental health first aid background or gatekeeper training, and you want to put your hand up to offer your services to run these sessions, we'll include a separate link in the post email to this. There's going to be a post email for you to put your hand up, your background, your qualifications, so that we have you on file, but also to add you to that WhatsApp group. So we form that network, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. I've got a quick question. I put it in the chat, but I'm curious for schools what the price points are to have somebody come in. Is it a 1 hour, a 1 day? Do the prices change depending on if it's staff or children? And I guess my question is around pricing for schools. Thank you.
Thanks, Toltu. I'll speak to that. Emma, feel free to jump in. So this is all no cost to schools. So we're offering this in the immediate short term in our current climate. And we're, I guess, leaning on people's time. And a lot of people have reached out, clinicians who want to give time. So far, alhamdulillah, yeah, just for the short term, it's a one-off. It's a one-off engagement with schools. And it's for whoever can kind of dedicate that time at the moment.
And sorry, sister, to answer your question, the toolkit is free. So it's free. It's free of charge.
Jazakallah khairan. Yeah, I just wanted to know the price if you wanted to bring someone out into the school, but if you're saying it's a free one-off, that's the message I've taken. Jazakallah khair.
And please, we're always, like Ayman beautifully put, we rely on everyone's collective wisdom. We'd invite anyone who wants to contribute or share ideas or be involved to please reach out. Yeah. So I guess the post email to this session is going to be more clearer in terms of the different links, inshallah, that will direct you to. So just to wrap us up, I wanted to take the opportunity to once again thank you for being here. Jazakallah khairan. And again, these are the different supports and services that are available if you do need to reach out for whatever reason to access. I also wanted to acknowledge and thank Monique from Nasiha Consulting, as was alluded to by Brother Ayman, for providing us with a lot of the information to put the toolkit together, and also her collaboration with CMW to put the online training link together, as well as Educate, Center for Muslim Wellbeing, and the other Shifa project partners. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I'm sure you wouldn't mind an early mark as teachers, so we finished 10 minutes early. But Ali, Ayman, and I will remain online for the next 10 minutes if you just want to stay back for an informal yarn. Yeah, and you know, we close off with a final prayer and dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to alleviate the hardships on our brothers and sisters in Gaza, in occupied Palestine, and anywhere around the world who are facing hardships, in Sudan, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, and anywhere else. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to heal our hearts and heal the hearts of the broken, and to bring comfort to those that are facing losses around the world. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us barakah, and we ask him to give us tawfiq in supporting ourselves and our communities here who are struggling in this moment. Thank you once again for joining us, and jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum. I'll just stop recording.